On the 242nd day of the war, the European Union adopted one of the most serious packages of sanctions for the last time. It includes not only the Shadow Fleet ship, but also the North Stream, as well as the Russian oil ceiling. In addition, it was sanctioned by the PZROS oil in India. In general, this is a rather serious blow to the Russian economy, which is feeling itself in a very bad way now. Trump is expecting from Ukraine not only strikes on Moscow and St. Petersburg, but also an offensive on the front. Washington Post reports on this. According to them, this was announced by the American President Zelensky in a conversation on July 4. The channel SANCTIONS reveals the details of the successful attack of Ukrainian military on the Russian airfield in Crimea. Several helicopters and air defense systems were destroyed. The moment is very tense for Ukraine at the front. Russians are pressing everywhere where they can press, where they cannot, they are also trying. The offensive has been going on for 3 months. Somewhere it was possible to stop it, as in the Sumy region, and somewhere not yet, as in the Pokrovske direction. Russia sends many people to their last attacks from which they do not return. The Russian army is more and more reminiscent of the horde of zombies and not of the military units. At the same time, Russian soldiers themselves continue to complain about the lack of basic things such as water and food, neglectful attitude, and extremely high losses. This and much more in today's fresh summary, which you can support with your likes, comments, and subscriptions to the channel. All these actions help promote the video, especially your subscriptions. They are important for YouTube algorithms. It is on them that it is oriented, making a decision whether to promote the video or not. Therefore, do not forget to subscribe to the channel. Well, you can also support this channel financially. Link to support on Patreon, it is in the description. You can also buy NVPN, a means to bypass blocking, which allows you to bypass YouTube blocking, Twitter blocking, Instagram blocking, blocked media, and so on. All this is available to you with VPN, and if you are looking for a reliable VPN that you can be sure of, this is a VPN. The link to its purchase is in the description. Buying it, you support this channel. VPNs in Russia are still legal. You can buy them, you can use them. And the new law, which everyone is discussing, does not prohibit the use of VPNs in any way. No matter how many media they make, there are no feedbacks. There is nothing about the prohibition of VPNs in this bill. Therefore, the link is in the description, and we continue. The long-suffering 18th package of sanctions of the EU against Russia has finally been adopted. Hungary and Slovakia have ceased to resist, and even Malta. Apparently, they have been assured that they will remain without oil and gas, while demonstrating that there are no real friends among the European leaders in the Kremlin. Only situational allies. This is how the head of European diplomacy, Kaja Kallas, described the measures. We are even more reducing the Kremlin's military budget. Another 105 ships of the Shadow Fleet have been sanctioned. We are also limiting access to Russian banks for financing. The production of pipelines in the North Stream will be prohibited. The price of oil has been reduced. We are increasing the pressure on the Russian military industry, the Chinese banks, which help to bypass sanctions, and we are blocking the export of the technology used by the BPA. We are imposing large sanctions against the largest oil impoverishment in India. Our sanctions are also directed against those who deal with the ideological treatment of Ukrainian children. Of course, we will talk about this package in detail tomorrow in the economic report with Vladimir Milov. But now I see how some Western experts characterize it quite positively, in the sense that European sanctions have finally grown their teeth. In addition to the specific effect, this is another demonstration to Putin that at least European partners of Ukraine are more than serious. And this package looks really more serious than many previous ones. The main thing is that in monitoring the sanctions, that is, the obstacles of their bypass, there would be as much enthusiasm as in their acceptance. The Washington Post reports that during the call with Vladimir Zelensky on July 4, Donald Trump said that Ukraine would not be able to change the course of the war if it would only defend itself, and it needed to move on to the offensive. When the call was completed, the high-ranking Ukrainian official could not hide his relief. According to him, Andrei Yermak's reaction was the following: "Wow, that was the best call we've ever had." The call seemed so positive that the Ukrainian side was surprised by this. The spirit was raised, but it's too early to celebrate. We need to wait for action, said the Ukrainian official. What about the potential opportunities for Ukraine to attack? If we talk about the Zetniks, for example, or about Igor Strelkov, who is also a Zetnik, one of the most famous, then they have been waiting for the Ukrainian offensive for quite a long time. Basically, how can it look like? Russia is now throwing into battle everything that it has, all the people, all the resources sources, Russia is doing everything possible to move forward. Apparently, Vladimir Putin sincerely believes that he has some kind of opportunity. I don't know where he drew it from, but let's really achieve that the Russian military capture the territories that Russia claims. Donetsk region, Lugansk region, Zaporozhsk region, and Kherson region. In reality, there is no such opportunity. But since reality does not meet the expectations of Vladimir Putin, the resources that are spent on this are colossal, and the losses of the Russians are also colossal, record for this war. Accordingly, this is a war on exhaustion, what we see now. Therefore, when one of the sides is exhausted, Russia hopes that it will be a Ukrainian country, then the other side will be able to conduct a serious offensive and go deep. For example, we saw this in the Kharkov region in 1922, when the Russian troops were exhausted, Ukraine went into a sharp counterattack, and this is considered one of the most successful military operations in the modern history of the war. Actually, we can see something like this already this autumn. I don't want to guess and run forward. I don't know what resources the Kremlin has. I don't know what resources Ukraine has, but it is quite difficult to imagine some kind of attack on Ukraine right now. Well, at least for this, Ukraine should have reserves hidden somewhere which can lead to a sharp fight, and these reserves are not yet visible. Should be noted that, for example, before the start of the Kursk operation, Ukrainian reserves were also not visible, and it was also not clear that they would go to battle and be able to capture large enough territories in the Kursk region. Therefore, hypothetically, we can see a repetition of something like this, but a lot depends on the supply. Now, fortunately, America has started supplying weapons again, and moreover, Trump looks very inspired to increase these supplies, add missiles, and much more. Let's see what will be in reality. The idea of specific supply nomenclatures is not reported, thank God. This was stopped by the majority of Ukrainian allies, including Germany, for example, which also looks very decisive. In general, it is quite possible to imagine a Ukrainian offensive, but no one will dare to guess, of course. But Trump himself, who now wants not only to help Putin, but clearly expresses his desire for Ukraine to be able to destroy the Russian army and achieve success on the battlefield. All this, of course, inspires. For how long, it is not clear. Let's see how Trump will behave and what he will do. And what he will do in 50 days when the ultimatum that he put on Russia will end. But nevertheless, this change is, of course, a radical B positive. Another country is interested in the Ukrainian drone industry. Romania wants to produce Ukrainian drones that could also be supplied to other European countries. In connection with this, the Ministry of Defense of Romania is starting negotiations with Ukrainian colleagues, reports Digi24. Discussions about the possible deal are planned at the meeting of the head of defense departments of both countries. The idea is that Ukrainian manufacturers will provide technologies developed taking into account real combat conditions, and Romania will finance joint production of components on its territory. The place of potential production is not yet determined, but it will probably be Brasov. The manufactured UAVs will enter the arms of the Romanian armed forces, and some are planning to export to interested European countries. However, as journalists and publications found out, now in the Romanian budget there are no free funds for the quick implementation of such a project. Therefore, most likely, the implementation of a potential deal between Ukraine and Romania on joint production of drones will begin in 2026. I have told you many times that in my opinion post-war Ukraine will have the status of a military blacksmith for the whole of Europe. Ukraine will have a unique experience, a large number of protected plants, great skills in the scale of production, and will supply the European army with weapons, because those will naturally accumulate it, since we have now obviously entered a new world arms race. Therefore, yes, Ukraine will be a blacksmith of weapons not only for Europe, but also for the United States. We are still waiting for the details of the megashoot, as Vladimir Zelensky calls it, between the United States and Ukraine about drones. In Ukraine, the Ukraine test program is starting. Foreign manufacturers are allowed to test the latest weapons directly on the battlefield, Reiter reports. Companies will be able to send equipment for combat testing, conduct remote training, and receive feedback from the VSU on the front line. The priority is the PVO of the drone interceptor, IAEA, and the system of combat with planned bombs, sea drones, REV, and smart artillery. In my opinion, a wonderful initiative of Ukraine in the future will receive weapons already checked in combat conditions without the sudden discovery of shortcomings, and defense companies will be able to add to the description of their products, checked in Ukraine, all the more so that this is already practically a mandatory condition. As the Minister of the Armed Forces of Great Britain Luke Pollard said recently, if you are a company, a drone manufacturer, and your product is not present at the front in Ukraine, then you can close the trap. The channel of the Spy Dossier provides details of the Ukrainian strike on the Pokrovske airfield in the occupied Crimea. At that time, the SBU stated that Russia lost several helicopters, and the channel confirms this. In early June, the Spy Dossier writes, a BPL attack on the Pokrovske airfield on the Pokrovske settlement of the Crimea was carried out, the Spy Dossier writes. The strike was carried out in the zone of responsibility of the 18th Anti-Aircraft Missile Regiment of the Military Unit 85388 in Fedosia. The attack was carried out using 3 BPL strikes. The S-1 tank was destroyed, the Mi-8 helicopter was destroyed, the Mi-26 helicopter was damaged. The person in charge does not write a spy file but accordingly confirms data from the SBU about that attack. Usually I only bring you the most striking case of Russian strikes on the civilian population. In this report, I will provide all the information that the insider collected to show that peaceful Ukrainians are being tested every day. And of course, a special thank you to the insider for the fact that such work is carried out every day. As a result of the airstrike on Kostyantynivka, 3 civilians were injured and houses were destroyed. According to the local authorities, 3 FAP-250s were dropped on the city. A 64-year-old man, said the head of OVA Ivan Fedorov, died as a result of an airstrike. Another man was injured during an attack on the Zaporozhye district. A 52-year-old man in the Dnepropetrovsk region died in a strike on the Pavlograd district. 2 more were injured, said the head of OVA Sergei Lysak. As a result of the BPA attack on Kamiensky district, 2 people were killed, 11 were injured. Also, an electric vehicle was attacked in the region. The driver died, his assistant was wounded. Later, Russian pilots attacked the locomotive on the Pridneprovskaya railway for the 2nd time in a day, transporting civilian cargo. In a crooked corner, as a result of the attack, a woman was injured on July 17. At the same time, the author of this channel, Asvidamiddle, writes that the blow was inflicted on the local TCK. A traditional inscription on the Ukrainian TCK, from the locals, was already applied to the drone. The channels tell that in Pokrovske and Kamiensky there were also attacks on the territorial centers of the complex. 9 people were injured in the Kherson region as a result of the Russian shelling by 2 metro workers and a policeman. In addition, the car of Kherson's chief Raven attacked the drone, reports the United Jewish Community of Ukraine. In the car of Yosef Itzhak Wolf there was a direct hit by a drone during the movement. The salons were occupied by the Raven himself, a member of his family. Fortunately, no one was injured. The car is seriously damaged in the front. In general, if Netanyahu wants to repeat the success of the 12-day war with Iran, then please. Because the Russians shoot at the Raven, allegedly fighting against neo-Nazism, I remind you, the Russians shoot at the Raven, at his family, that is, at an absolutely civilian car with civilians inside. And Israel has all the reasons to defend them. They defend their friends, for example, in Syria, but this is just a thought. The real defense of Ukraine is the defense of the Ukrainian army, the Ukrainian fighters, who risk their lives every day and give up their lives to stop Russian aggression, to stop the fascists and the occupiers, to protect the citizens of Ukraine from these missiles, from these troops, and from the offensive of Russia. Therefore, it is very important to help them, and we continue to gather for the 113th Battalion, 110th TRO. Here is a message from the fighters to you. We are a group of fire support of the 113 Battalion, 110th Brigade of the TRO. We are in the Zaporozhian direction. Dear friends, now we are opening a collection of the necessary things that will significantly increase the security and effectiveness of our work. We need a night vision device, RAP devices, and a car. Having these things, we will have an advantage in the night time, protection against enemy attacks, mobility, and quick response. Therefore, we appeal to you for help in the collection of RAP devices and cars. In particular, we ask the subscribers of Nacke who help us with solving these problems more than once. Glory to Ukraine, glory to the world. Here is the QR code for the monobank. Here is the QR code for the monobank. Well, it appeared somewhere here. In the description, a link to the monobank, to PayPal, to USDT, TRC20, that is, to cryptocurrencies. Thank you very much to everyone who participates in the assembly. I, of course, also participate in it. We have already gathered about a third, maybe almost half by the time you hear this. Thank you very much for your participation, for your indifference. The fighters are giving you a low bow. You really save people, save lives, help Ukrainian defenders to fight this monstrous plague that the Russian army is representing right now. Not very good news comes all week from the Pokrovske direction. Russians are moving forward. Yes, slowly, with huge losses, but they are moving forward. Some even write about the local crisis of Ukrainian defense. However, one, for example, channel of the Russian military sees the situation differently and disagrees with the victorious relations of Russian media. This is what the Don't Stop War channel published from this direction. They know, they write, that the media reports there. It would be better to ask people who don't give a beep about what's going on but move forward. He writes about the Pokrovske direction. In the area of Udichnoi, we are breaking through the fields to the south, trying to get to the road leading to the settlement. In Kotlin, without changes in the area of Zverevovo, we are trying to move closer to the city from the southwest flank. There are intensive battles. In the outskirts of Lesovka and Dachinskoye, there are fierce assaults, but the elves are entrenched in the southeast from Novokonomitskoye. In the Myrnograd direction, the infantry assaults continue on the settlement of Mayak. Ukrainians say that there are suspicions about the work of our DRG between the village of Suvorov and their forward position. At the Red Liman and Rodinskoye sites, we are working on strategic objects and infrastructure in which Ukrainians have settled, trying to move through the industrial zone to bypass Novokonomitskoye. But for now, Ukrainians keep everything under control, writes the Russian Z channel, one of the military. According to Deep State, Russians have advanced in the South Donetsk direction in the region of Voskresenka and Zelenoga. In the very Voskresenka, according to the project, the Russian forces have not yet entered, so the Ukrainian flags published the day before are still worth something. Nevertheless, Russian armed forces continue to approach the borders of Dnepropetrovsk and the south, and if they are not stopped, they will enter it on a fairly wide front, as recently warned by the Ukrainian military observer Konstantin Mashevitz. Deep State records the entry of Russian armed forces into the village of Yablanovka, almost on the outskirts of Konstantinovka. The promotion of the Russians at this site threatens the supply line of Ukrainian positions in the area of Sh Shurbanovka and Petrovka, and in the entire area. South of the Klebembitsky water reservoir, from where the fighters of the Ukrainian Defense Force, with the current trends, sooner or later will have to retreat in the direction of all the same Konstantinovka and prepare the defense of the city itself. The Ukrainian military author of the Telegram channel Officer continues to talk about the deterioration of the situation in the Vovchansk region. This time he wrote the following: in the area of Tikhiv in the Vovchansk direction, the situation has deteriorated significantly. If everything continues in the same spirit, then the future is like this, a retreat to the Vovchansk Kuters. I don't understand why this is not particularly shown anywhere when there is a specific problem. Although sometimes failures can be better silenced, because some characters just like to talk about how cool and independent they are, and in fact, they write 3 points. At the place of the highest command, the officer continues: I would be interested in who some commanders of the unit send to the front line and who, in general, in the last 2 or 3 months, is among the 200s and 300s. I think the presence of some officials in these lists can surprise. The question is only one: why is everything happening exactly this way? To be honest, I don't really understand what this officer is hinting at. It remains to be hoped that this will be understood by the Ukrainian higher command, which he is manipulating, and will make a corresponding conclusion. Meanwhile, the Z people were impressed by the basic lines of defense that Ukraine built in the Kharkov region. A couple of reactions were collected by Ivan Filipov, the author of the channel on the Western Front, without changes. Frank showed defensive structures and forceful work in the Kharkov region. Everything is done there as it should be, and overcoming these trenches and ravines will really cause a lot of problems, writes the author. Alex Parker returns. All this line is a difficulty for the negatively gifted commanders who work mechanically, which is impossible, but if you think about it. And if you don't think about it, you can throw a ravine with your bodies and go through it, sarcasms the Russian military corps and Andrei Filatov. As I have already said, all these wonderful defense lines are built quite deep in the rear, many kilometers from the front line, because it is dangerous for the equipment and the builders themselves to build them closer, because of the constant attacks of Russian drones. So I hope that the Russians will not have to check these lines for strength, because they simply will not reach them. After signing the promotion of Russian armed forces on the front line, it is necessary not to forget what price it is given to the Russian military. 21 days, yes, we spent almost without food, without water. The command for some reason did not throw away the water. In his video, a military officer named Evgeny tells how the command sent soldiers to combat missions without elementary supplies. For 3 weeks, the soldiers were on a mission without water and food. Due to the fact that it was raining, they, unfortunately, managed to survive. Empty bottles of dirty water were collected. Even dirty water, well, it helped us survive, plus the allies, the guys who were moving through us. The soldier says that in battle, his unit suffered huge losses. A lot of our people died, the platoon commander died, the peasantry died, Rustic was called, Daniel died. Alexander, but now I will not name all the pawns. There was another video in which a Russian soldier demonstrates the miracles of heroism, throwing an anti-tank mine into a Ukrainian base, but not everyone was involved in the feat. For example, the author of the channel Ubish number 8, which is led by a mobilized one, writes the following. There is no such thing as a chopper to fly and drop a machine gun on the head of the Ukrainians. Let's go, soldier. A chopper costs about 1.5 million rubles with a prepared operator and retreat, let's say about 3. Compensation for the death of this soldier is 7.12 million rubles plus 1.52 million raised rubles to lure him to a contract, plus salary in the region of 220,000 a month. But in the heads of many of our military, a person is still cheaper than a drone, the author concludes. Ukrainian unmanned units continue their hunt for the Russian ZRK. This time, in the 14th Regiment, the unmanned aerial complexes were told about the successful defeat of the Russian Tora with a drone with a machine vision. That's what they wrote about in the regiment's channel. Operators of the 14th Separate Regiment BPAK of the unmanned forces continue their hunt for the enemy's priority targets. This time, as a result of the joint operation of the air scouts of the Cirque Group and the BPAK strike operators on the Kursk direction, the Russian ZRK Tor was found and hit. The enemy complex twice tried to knock down the BPAK strike group, and after failure they left the compromised positions. However, the Ukrainian drone's target capture system worked better than the Russian system, worth tens of millions of dollars. In the technological war, the self-confident hunter quickly becomes a prey himself. They finish the post. In this video, you can see how the target capture system works with the help of machine vision. It identifies the object by itself or by the indication of the drone, after which it automatically points the drone at the target. About these and other technologies that have been switched from science fiction films to battlefields and right now help Ukraine to win, I told in a recent video about how to use drones instead of people, not the other way around. In the Soviet Union, a rather interesting reform has been going on for a long time, which, at the same time, is said to be very few. The third separate tank, the Iron Brigade, during the continuing reform of the tank units, was reformat into a third separate heavy mechanized brigade, the military says. The relevant announcement is posted on the official page of the brigade on Facebook. Thus, the 3rd Tank Brigade became the 4th of the 5 tank brigades reorganized into heavy mechanized. The 1st, 5th, and 17th Tank Brigades went through this process earlier. Probably the 4th Tank Brigade will also be reformed soon. In addition, it is known that one heavy mechanized brigade was created not on the basis of tank units, but on the basis of the 117th Mechanized Brigade. As the Resource Militaroland net explained in a note about reformatting the 1st Tank Brigade, within the framework of the reform, the Union loses 1 tank battalion and receives an additional mechanized battalion. Its new structure will include 2 tank battalions, 2 mechanized battalions, and 2 gun battalions. The transformation of tank brigades into heavy mechanized brigades is a logical step, says Military Land. Tank brigades have never fought as a full-fledged brigade formation. Their linear tank battalions were sent where they were needed. In addition, there is a shortage of tanks to complete the tank brigade, which requires up to 160 vehicles. As a result, the higher command decided to prioritize the delivery of tanks to the mechanized brigades, leaving the tank brigades what they managed to collect. The standard schedule of the Ukrainian units is on track with time in the question of not only drones, but also tanks. It is possible to argue for a long time about whether tanks are needed on the modern battlefield, but they will definitely not be used in the form of huge tank lavas, which were provided by the Soviet DPRK. In fact, it was sent to the ground together with the burnt-down armored vehicles under Avdiivka and the Russian columns. Now the tanks act alone or in pairs as a means of reinforcement on separate areas of the front, and the brigades, which make up most of the armament, are tanks at the expense of the infantry. In the end, it turns out that they are unable to keep the front, and accordingly it becomes useless because it cannot come to full force. Apparently the armed forces of Ukraine realized this and decided to reformat their tankers for new realities. Well, they did it right. The reform was also subject to the Ukrainian government. Restructuring in the Ukrainian government, which I told you about a few days ago, went not according to the plan but based on the sources. The ex-minister of Defense of Ukraine, Rustem Umerov, was appointed Secretary of the National Security and Defense Council. The relevant decree has been published on the president's website. Earlier, the media reported that as part of the restructuring, Umerov will become the new ambassador of Ukraine to the United States. However, President Zelensky proposed a candidacy to the Minister of Justice, Olga Stefanishina, for this post. The post of Minister of Defense was taken by the ex-Prime Minister Denis Shmyhal and the government headed by Yulia Sviridenko. Apparently, Umerov, even if he is not the future ambassador, will still take active part in the negotiations. President of Ukraine Vladimir Zelensky instructed the new Secretary of the National Security Agency to activate the work in the negotiating direction. Zelensky reported on this on his Telegram channel. Now the second meeting in Istanbul is being held. We need more dynamics in this process, said Vladimir Zelensky. The head of state reported that he held a meeting with Umarov on which the issues of defense and security were discussed, as well as the personal tasks of the new secretary of the National Security Agency. In particular, Zelensky ordered to continue working with the international partners of Ukraine on the supply of weapons, as well as the complete implementation of all existing agreements on the development of new formats, including the creation of joint production and construction of defense enterprises abroad. In addition, among the priority tasks, the analysis and implementation of the solutions previously adopted by the National Security Agency and the position of the Supreme Commander-in-Chief are named. The issue of the resumption of negotiations between Ukraine and Russia is discussed in the context of the implementation of the agreements reached in the previous rounds. The next round can take place after the completion of the exchange of prisoners and bodies of the dead. At the same time, as Russian representatives previously stated, Moscow is waiting for a principled agreement from Kiev for new negotiations. Z-Channel is far from always talking about the specific problems of the Russian army. Sometimes it turns out to be of the same character, but it is no less interesting. For example, the channel's Sick Conter wrote a practically philosophical post about why the Russian army cannot change and adapt to modern realities. The main problem of our army, he writes, is that it is analogous and in every sense of the word, says the author. Why were there so many twists and turns during mobilization? Because the whole account on paper cards on which it is impossible to set up any sorting except by hand. Why is everything so bad with communication today? Because the people who are responsible for it at the top do not see anything except paper documents. They have mobile phones today, and not because they are inphobes, but because they do not know how to use others. It is so easy for us to lose documents inside the Ministry of Defense. We do not receive orders, etc. Because they are 99% paper-based, handwritten, and even if it is loaded or electronic, they are still printed, signed, scanned, and then loaded back. Why do we have new machines at our defense factories with a script? Because it is impossible to work on them, because the flash drive cannot be used, it is not safe. Therefore, it is forbidden to work on them. Therefore, it is easier to work on an old machine without any chips than to load the entire program with your hands from the keyboard. Because if you make a mistake with the next sheet of text for the machine, then the part will be clogged, and perhaps the machine and the equipment, and he is not a millionaire. And the fact that this notebook with the code can be done exactly the same as the flash drive is not, we have not heard about it. Here, analog leaders can build at least something digital. Their brains don't work like that. They don't understand. Why can't subordinates teach them? Because the general in the vast majority of cases is easier to say, Colonel, you're an asshole, you brought some beep to my signature, get the beep out of here, than to ask, Colonel, I don't understand anything, explain it to me in a simple way. And if a general is suddenly capable of such recognition, then it is not a fact that a colonel is capable of explaining near him at this moment. This is how we live. This is how, I hope, everything will remain, I conclude, I am confident. History of relations with the Russian military continues to break through the bottom time after time. The Russian military was executed for a joke on the commander of the 18th Army of Russian Armed Forces, General Petev. Many people have told about this story, for example, Ukrainian journalist Denis Kazansky. He decided to joke about the war with the convocation elephant and wrote in the chat that he painted a portrait of General Petev on the foot. This picture or screen, I don't know who started to throw it to the commander of the company or vice versa, and that's how it came apart from us. What can I say? It came apart like this, in short it came to Petev. Came apart like this, in short it came. Part like this, in short it came. Part like this. The joke, as they say, went straight to the grave. Its authors were sent to the front line and shot their own people. And then they were also sent to Sochi so as not to pay any family payments, Kazansky says. It is almost impossible to leave the Russian army, even if you are a foreigner who signed contracts for a certain period of time. And the Jordanian volunteer Abdullah Hassan Hussein, born in 1999, reported that he was held in custody after the term of the contract expired. He signed a contract on June 27, 2024 with a one-year term in the military commissariat of the city of Livny, the Urlovsk region. The soldier had no intention of serving any further. He did not submit a report on the extension of the contract, but after the term of the contract expired, he was held in custody. I spent almost 30 days in prison. They told me to leave and go to Russia. I have no papers. The volunteer noted that there is no reason for the automatic extension of the contract. Since he is a foreigner, therefore he does not understand why such a relationship is connected. I do not have a Russian passport. I do not have a Russian ID card. They let me work. Citizen of Jordan does not hope that after his appeal he will have the opportunity to leave the unit. As mentioned in the channel, do not wait for good news. The Belarusian volunteer who was sent to the front line after the expiry of the contract, leaving no remuneration for the injury, appealed with a similar complaint. If you do not believe me that the state does not need returning SWOs, then listen to how they call themselves. Dmitry Ivanikov, a veteran of military actions and a member of the SWO, served in the 35th Separate Guards Fire Brigade, the military unit 41659. He told how the system throws soldiers after service. After a serious injury, Dmitry was commissioned by the Military Medical Commission as he can no longer serve. He has a second disability group. Now he receives a pension of 40,000 rubles. According to him, this money is barely enough for medicine and life, and the state simply turned away. The state took advantage of us, and since I can no longer serve because they sent me to the VK, they just wrote me off. And 40,000, it's normal on a combat wound, a pension. Worked material for the state, while you serve, it's okay, and when you come back to the wounded, you don't care. About the state, after the wound, he was left alone. The local authorities in Novosibirsk did not respond to the request to help. The local authorities, I'm generally silent. I said that, well, I asked for help, I need to completely close the roof, solve the problem with the wiring. Also in the house, as it were, cosmetic repair of the local authorities. Yes, 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 and that's it. And they were silent, and no answer, and no hello. The veteran also stated about the problems with medical supplies. He buys all the medicines at his own expense. I asked, can I become Nalkatov? Then part of the pension is repaid and they give not medicines but Kermu completely. In the end, he addresses those who are only going to sign the contract. As long as you serve, everything is fine. If trouble touches you and you return as an invalid, then nothing good awaits you. The man who deprived his ex-girlfriend of an eye was released after taking part in the war in Ukraine. The former figure on the case of a cruel attack, the result of which Ksenia Dushanova lost her eye, was released after sending to war. Earlier, the investigative bodies said that Rashid Aliyev was injured and is in the hospital. However, as the victim herself claims, the man moves freely around the country and lives an active life, the Romp building tells. According to Dushanova, Aliyev was previously arrested for the attack, as a result of which she became disabled in the spring of 1925 and left the detention center to participate in combat actions. In June, she received an official response from the investigation committee. Aliyev was allegedly in the hospital with an injury. However, according to Dushanova, a few weeks later, she began to receive messages from subscribers. Aliyev was seen in Sochi, as well as in the clubs where he dances and shoots videos for his social networks. In this channel, he publishes recordings of a happy life, allegedly not hiding from subscribers. According to Ksenia, screenshots and videos that are sent to her definitely confirm that the man is free. Ksenia added that she does not know where Aliyev is and is afraid of her safety. She does not have any new information from the investigative committee or other law enforcement agencies about the movement of Aliyev. In 1924, ex-partner Dushanova, Rashid Aliyev, attacked her with a knife, causing multiple injuries, including a blow to the eye. Ksenia survived but lost her right eye. Aliyev was detained and placed in prison, but the case did not reach trial. What exactly is behind this story? A big question. Because there are rumors, and there are rumors more than once, that this mechanism of release from prison for alleged participation in the war is used, including just to buy people out of prison. Well, that is, whoever needs to be brought in here, whoever needs to be brought in there. As a result, a person simply leaves prison, even if not for war, although it is formally listed somewhere by someone and so on. Perhaps this is exactly the case. We will never know. But in any case, we know for sure that the Russian army, the Russian present war, is, among other things, a conveyor for the liberation of criminals without any of their fixes. On the contrary, they give them weapons, the ability to kill people, and so on. Yes, of course, most of them die or become colleagues, but some of them return to society. And someone finishes his business to the end, killing those who could not kill before, and someone kills a new victim. It was Michael Nacke, and see you soon. Bye.